get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
And welcome aboard, Kneecaps Nation. We are clear for takeoff here on this most current episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progard, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by the trivia master himself, Phil Byrne. And Phil, I'm going to put your trivia knowledge to the test here. So
okay.
This is our first episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast in the month of July. So you're going back to work after the holiday weekend with us here on Kneecaps for Breakfast. So we appreciate that. What is unique about where we stand here in this current month of July?
We're going to have some Detroit Lions football.
Absolutely,
at the
Phil.
End of this month. There we go.
Absolutely. The trivia master does it again. Yes, we have Detroit Lions football at some point during this month, even though it's going to be a very neutered roster that we're going to see take the field in the Hall of Fame game against the LA Chargers. But I'm sure there are going to be some individuals that we all recognize that take the field over some of the 4 quarters. But yes, Phil, we will have Lions football at some point this month. We've weathered the brutal part of the offseason, so brighter days are ahead of us very, very soon on the horizon. But before we get to that, Phil, there is a little bit more in the way of downtime that we have to navigate through before the Lions form training camp in a few weeks. So we kind of thought it would be a nice opportunity here in this still dead period, if you will, to branch out a little bit and look at the rest of the NFL at large, outside of the 4 walls of Allen Park, outside of the 4 walls of the NFC North, and just see what else we're going to be dealing with. Because once we get into September, with the exception of a few score updates or serious injuries or just big stories on the day, it's going to be pretty much Lions, 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 which is the main point of what this podcast is, but there's still a lot more that exists outside of what we spend the most amount of time talking about. Okay, Phil, so I'm going to give you the option here. Take door number 1 or door number 2.
Ooh, okay. This is like a heads or tails.
Basic, it's kind of what we're doing here. You got a 50,
would be
50.
1. We'll go tails being door number 2, tails number fails.
Okay, so we will start in the AFC, Phil, with our preview. We'll start east and head west. So the AFC East, is this going to be the year that the Buffalo Bills finally get that ever-elusive Super Bowl title? Will they even win their division? It's hard to say, but it's clear, Phil, that the Bills are kind of that team to beat. We've got the Jets with Aaron Glenn as the new head coach. We've got the Patriots, new head coach and Mike Vrabel. And we've got the Dolphins, who it kind of seems like they've got some pieces and have had some pieces with Mike McDaniel as the head coach for a handful of years, but for whatever reason, they just can't ever seem to put it all together when the chips are down. What are your thoughts on the AFC East, Phil? Is this going to be once again Buffalo's division to lose, or can somebody else realistically rise up and be able to make some noise?
Well, I think you got a couple interesting things in play here. You got a coach that I think was a very intriguing hire at the time that he came into Miami, and Mike McDaniel. And then I think you've also got 2 coaches that bring a lot of integrity and grit and some things very much like the Lions culture in place with Aaron Glenn and Mike Vrabel, that I think there's not enough talent on the 3 other teams in the division to actually give the Buffalo Bills, who should still be one of the front runners for the actual Super Bowl, a run in the division. What I think the true case is going to be is who's going to finish number 2 in this division to the Buffalo Bills. In years past, I think a lot of people would leverage the Miami Dolphins with Tyreek Hill and with Tua and some of the explosive playmakers that they have. If I'm being honest, though, I don't think they have enough. I think some other teams have caught up to the explosive nature of that offense. I don't think their defense is very good at all. I don't think they have enough balance on that team. So I guess I'm going to say, go out on a limb. could the New York Jets make a push towards the Buffalo Bills? I think now that they have the stigma of Aaron Rodgers kind of brushed aside from them, and they're kind of giving more of a positive culture in place, maybe they're going to do enough to chase a wild card spot. I think, though, at the end, the Buffalo Bills, too talented, too top heavy with the talent that they have on that team. I think they should still be able to run away in this division.
And that's the tough thing about the way this AFC East has looked over the last couple of decades is that it's been the Patriots and everybody else. And
Yeah.
then ever since the Belichick and Brady divorce from the Patriots a handful of years ago, it's now been the Buffalo Bills and everybody else. You're not getting that competitive factor where it comes down to that final week or the final 2 weeks to really get a handle on who's going to win this division. And it's not at all uncommon to see in these years Buffalo going 6-0 against the division, the Patriots in those years previously going 6-0 against the division. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to the same level of sex appeal and interest generation that the NFL strives for. It's just the way that the AFC East has been set up this last, again, 25 years or so. Buffalo, I'm sure based on odds makers, you're probably a little bit more plugged into what the odds are saying than I am, Phil, that the Buffalo Bills are probably predicted to run away with this thing in a landslide.
Do you want me to give you the odds right now?
Absolutely.
All right. So according to FanDuel, again, no bias towards any of these sports books, just the one that I
We get what
feast
we
on,
can
like,
get
think
our
of.
hands on the quickest.
So here is their projected order, so to speak, based on their odds for where they think these teams are right now. No surprise, Buffalo Bills, the odds-on favorite to win the AFC East, and they are at negative 250. So minus 250 as a favorite. That is probably going to be, I haven't seen all of these yet, probably going to be one of the largest odds on favorites in the NFL to win their division. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We talked about how these other teams are going to rank. FanDuel has the New England Patriots at plus 500 right now. So plus 500 New England Patriots. I think maybe some people thinking Mike Vrabel,
A little
if he
bit
can
of
get this
value.
turned around, maybe a little bit of a potential coach of the year candidate, maybe Drake May year two. Some of the other pieces that they plugged in there that they like. So that would mean the Miami Dolphins are the third ranked team by odds in the AFC East, plus 700. So Patriots and Dolphins pretty close. Surprising to me here as we're seeing this is that the Jets, a distant fourth as far as the odds are concerned, at plus 1,600. Now,
And I'm
again,
not,
these
yeah,
are
I'm not
odds to win the division. It's
exactly.
not necessarily to make the playoffs.
Correct. And I'm not
No,
terribly surprised by that because you're not going to put faith in a new head coach,
no.
rookie head coach, different quarterback. And it's the Patriots one that kind of surprises me a little bit because they're lacking, I
On
guess you
skill
could say. They
players
are
on offense.
lacking
Yeah.
playmakers beyond the quarterback position. Miami's got the players, but they haven't proven that once the weather cools off a little bit in the fall that they can keep it together. So that's what we're going to have to keep our eyes on as we start to look at the AFC East a little bit. Let's move on to the AFC North, Phil. So we had the Baltimore Ravens that got the job done and won the division a season ago. They seem to be doing a pretty solid job year in and year out of fielding a product that is capable of winning a division, that has
Yeah.
a say in who's going to win the Super Bowl. That's not to say they've been close in the last decade, but they at least field a beyond serviceable product.
Mm-hmm.
The Cincinnati Bengals have put a heck of a lot of money into their passing game the last couple of seasons, almost at a cost of the other positions on the field, and it has created a lot of tension and drama within the Cincinnati Bengals clubhouse, something to keep an eye on. I don't know what the Pittsburgh Steelers are up to. It seems like you would probably be at the point in the health of the franchise where it's almost like, hey, let's kind of start a rebuild, get a quarterback in here that we can have for long term. But I think the Steeler way is to keep things consistent and 9-8, 9-8, 10-7, 10-7, year over year over year over year seems to be what they are content with. And if they're able to make a run in the playoffs, then so be it. And then, of course, the Cleveland Browns don't appear to be going anywhere fast.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good read on the division there. I think this seems like a division that should, on paper, be able to get a team pushing towards the wild card, with either the Bengals or the Steelers, kind of the two favorites to be able to do that. I think very, very similar division in terms of what the AFC East is like, where you had that clear front runner. I think you would be crazy to pick against the Ravens unless you happen to be a Bengals or a Steelers fan to win this one. And the Cleveland Browns, you know, I think they're kind of like in that Jets territory. Where they've kind of shipped off some of the veterans. They are obviously the landing spot for Shador Sanders, their quarterback position, very, very unstable. And that, as you might imagine, does not translate to great odds to win their division.
So what are you seeing as far as the odds go? I assume the Ravens are going to be the favorite.
Yep. So I guess the thing is this is kind of like what we saw with the East, where 2 and 3, they're pretty close. There's one way that I think just bettors are going towards that we're kind of seeing with both of these here. So no shocker, the Ravens, the favorite in the AFC North, minus 140 to win the division. Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Bengals, going to be number 2. Even with the whole Trey Hendrickson kind of issue on defense there, but as you mentioned, a lot of money and resources on offense in that passing game. They're going to be the second favorite at plus 240. The Pittsburgh Steelers obviously bringing in Aaron Rodgers, kind of switching up some of their skill position players on offense as well, in third at plus 500. And we'll have to see if we find a team with lower odds to win their division. Because if I was a Cleveland Browns fan, I would just throw a buck on this, $5 on it, and just let it ride, see what happens, and root your team every
What'd
single
you do?
week.
You cost yourself a Little Caesars pizza. I mean, what's the worst that can happen?
The Cleveland Browns to win the AFC North, as of when we're taping this, right after the 4th of July, in the early part of July here, the Cleveland Browns are plus 3,000 to win the AFC North. The games have not even started yet. You usually do not see odds like that until you're about week 3, and some team is 0-3.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
plus 3,000 for Cleveland.
So why is this discussion relevant? And that's because the NFC North, which includes the Lions, will be doing the full tour of the AFC North on their schedule this year. So the Lions will see all 4 of those opponents. They will play at the Ravens and at the Bengals, and they will host the Browns and host the Steelers near the end of the season. I'm still very puzzled, if not intrigued, by what the Steelers are up to, Phil, before we shift gears on another division. You got Aaron Rodgers late into the offseason. You picked up DK Metcalf early on in the offseason. You just picked up a second tight end to kind of have a two-headed monster at tight end. You just traded for Jalen Ramsey and essentially a swap with Minkah Fitzpatrick. And there's still the specter of, are they going to give TJ Watt that big-time mega deal to make him the highest-paid defensive player in the history of the sport? So a lot of things going on under the radar in Pittsburgh, to where early on a lot of people were looking at that game week 15 and thinking, okay, that might be a pretty easy win, but who knows at this point?
I think the biggest thing with that team is Mike Tomlin has shown, if there's any other coach in the NFL, maybe not named Bill Belichick, in the last 25 years, he gets command of that locker room. He's going to need it. Aaron Rodgers and Jalen Ramsey in one locker room, not to mention some of the other guys they've got in there too. Could be combustible, but I've seen crazier things work out before. So we'll have to see with the Steelers.
So to the AFC South we go. So it was the Houston Texans once again getting the job done in the regular season. They didn't look quite as dominant in year 2 under DeMeco Ryans and year number 2 with C.J. Stroud at quarterback, but still in a weak AFC South, they did more than enough to get it done. Indianapolis is still always kind of in that more questions than answers type thing ever since Andrew Luck up and retired a handful of years ago. You could argue from a bystander's perspective, they haven't been able to get it right at quarterback, and therefore they really haven't been able to get it right as an organization ever since then. They just had their owner, Jim Irsay, pass this offseason, so you got to wonder, is the organization going to be up for sale anytime real soon, or will his offspring continue to run it like always? We don't really know there. I'm not sure what in the big blue heck the Jacksonville Jaguars are up to, but again, they're working in a new coach, the former offensive coordinator from the Buccaneers, the Duval guy, and the Titans are clearly in a full-on rebuild at this point. They're not going to be looking to make a whole lot of noise for a couple more seasons. So kind of same thing, Phil. Are we looking once again at a clear-cut favorite and then everybody else?
So I think, if you were going to put together like a divisions bet or something like that, I think this division and maybe the NFC West and what we'll get into, I think there's a lot of moving pieces. This is going to be one of those ones I don't think we have a clear-cut answer on, or at least a gut feeling on until maybe week 5, week
So that
6.
implies that you're thinking
Yeah.
Houston may take a step back this year.
Well, I think a lot of people thought they were going to take another step forward last year, and they didn't. They regressed. Still got into the playoffs, but just by the skin of their teeth. And I think this is kind of one of those things that they got a good nucleus in Houston, but are they able to build off of any of the momentum? So why I say that is here's how the AFC South reads. The Texans are the presumptive favorite heading into the season. But this is the first division that we have seen where the team that FanDuel picks as the favorite does not have minus odds. They have plus odds, which means this is going to be a pretty fascinating race, as how they're calling it in July. The Texans, though, the favorite at plus 110. Now, get how close these next two teams are. The Jacksonville Jaguars at plus 300. The Indianapolis Colts at plus 310. And as you mentioned, the Tennessee Titans in fourth at plus 750. So even the Titans, that's not really ruling them out. I mean, it is not like what we saw with the Cleveland Browns. It's not a distant fourth by any means. You mentioned the Colts and the Jaguars, a little unknown, but plus 310 versus plus 110 with the Texans. It's saying that they think that there's a legit shot that one of those other teams could pull off the division this year.
And I know there's been a little bit of volatility at receiver for the Texans. You're not going to get Tank Dell back this year. There's going to be some other uncertainty on that offense as well. And we don't know if we're going to get rookie CJ Stroud or second year CJ Stroud or something totally different. I still think that based on those odds, I think they're putting a little bit too much stock in what we haven't seen yet. We haven't seen Anthony Richardson take that next step to proving that he's a big time playmaker in this league. And I think it's safe to say at this point during his, albeit brief, tenure in the NFL, Phil, that Trevor Lawrence hasn't been anywhere near what anybody thought he was going to be. So I think you're putting blind faith in these two individuals, not to discount the defense or other elements of those teams, but you're starting to really think about, hey, we haven't seen this yet. We have seen Houston take care of business in the division. So why isn't there a bigger gap between these clubs? And I think it's going to be interesting to see how these teams continue to fill out their rosters as we get down to the start of the regular season to see how some of the weak points get taken care of. And then once we, like you said, Phil, get a few games under your belt, just kind of see what happens. But very interesting that they're predicting it to be a closer race than what we are expecting. Nothing like that, Phil, as we look at the AFC West. I think this is going to be the fun one. So, of course, Kansas City is the defending AFC champions. They went to the Super Bowl, did not get the job done. The Chargers look like they, at least on paper, could make life very, very difficult for the Chiefs. The Broncos, that took the last week of the regular season to mathematically eliminate them from doing anything of consequence. And the Raiders are the Raiders with the fresh out of retirement Pete Carroll as the head coach. So definitely a lot more up in the air, Phil, as we're looking at the AFC West.
But again, another division where there's a presumptive favorite, and I think the Chargers and Broncos have given you enough to believe that they could be very good this year,
Yes,
and make some solid runs, get into double digit win totals.
the opposite of
But
what we've seen with the Colts and the Jaguars. We've at least seen this transpire on the field.
with them, man, is that a big obstacle to overcome. And what are we? I mean, we got to be getting close to a decade now.
Yeah.
I have to believe with the Chiefs winning the AFC West, and I don't think it's their time to give it up quite yet. Maybe that happens when Travis Kelsey hangs it up, as well as some of the other guys on that team. But yeah, as you might imagine, Kansas City Chiefs the favorite, -115. And then kind of like what we've seen with some of the other divisions, it's 2 and 3, very, very close to this point with where they're at. FanDuel favors the Los Angeles Chargers just by a hair right now at +320, and the Broncos at +330. So basically, you can flip flop one of those. So as you're, maybe looking through some of these divisions, if for some reason you think, I think the wheels are going to fall off Kansas City coming off that Super Bowl, and you're just like, you know what? I got a lot of faith in Harbaugh and Peyton. They're phenomenal coaches. Those are pretty good odds. You're going to get a lot of bang for your buck with where those are at. Las Vegas Raiders, a lot of bang for your buck as well. We get back into the +1,000 club to to bring up the rear of the AFC West. FanDuel has the Raiders at +1,200. Listen, Raiders are not going to be winning the AFC West this year. You're going to be like, mark it down. So they're not winning the AFC West this year.
Exactly. But once again, you've got the intrigue at the 2 and 3 spots. And I don't
Yeah.
think Kansas City's stranglehold on the AFC West is going to be nearly as strong as what it has been over the course of the last decade, let's call it. I think that Justin Herbert still has a lot to prove in that. I don't think he has things to prove in that he's a solid, effective quarterback in this league. Definitely a top-tier quarterback in this league. I think what he still needs to prove some people wrong on is his ability to go out there and be an assassin in these big gotta-have-it games. And we haven't seen that from him individually yet. And so until then, I don't think you can sit here and say that the Chargers have a clear shot at getting that number one spot in the division. And with the Broncos, I think we can all agree that everything went better than expected a year ago with Bo Nix as the rookie quarterback. Is that something that Sean Payton can bottle up and sustain for year number 2? And I think you're looking at some of the guys up and down the roster. They still did quite a bit with less. When you look at guys who they have on their roster, you don't have nearly as much star power as some of the other teams that they're going to be going up against. And it makes you wonder, okay, is this something that the Broncos can do once again? Can they go out there and get 11 wins in a tough AFC West? I'm not sure they can, and it looks like the odds are in agreement that they could very easily be the number 3 team in their own division. Okay, so heading over to the NFC. So we will bypass the NFC North because we are going to be talking about them plenty as we move forward here. Let's go to the NFC East. So we know that the Philadelphia Eagles are your previous year Super Bowl champions. I don't foresee a whole lot changing as far as that goes. They look like they are poised to carry what they've been forward for years to come, and they continue to build their roster both through the draft and free agency in a winning state of mind. So there's no question that the Eagles are going to be around for a bit. The Washington Commanders were definitely the surprise of the NFL, and I think there might be a little bit of hometown and recency bias in that because it was the Commanders that ended the Lions season a season ago. Jaden Daniels coming in and hitting 62,000 plus over the head with a garbage can on a random January Saturday night. They made a few moves to improve their outlook for this year. You have the Dallas Cowboys that when healthy, Dak Prescott can be a big-time playmaker in this league. And if the offense is humming, then you're looking at some wins in the regular season. There's questions about them from a coaching standpoint and whether or not they can do enough in the playoffs when it matters. And even though the Giants have really quietly built up a nice defense in the last few drafts, their offense still seems like it's light years away.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good read on the division. I think, some people might buy too much into the Commanders when we talk about the division. Like the Eagles, yes, they have lost some pieces on defense, but their track record through the draft, if you look year over year, they're getting solid contributions. Look at that defense and the way that they have turned that over year after year after year, just with guys that they're getting not even in the first round, but just deeper on that mid part of the draft. That's where they've really hit their strides. So, I think the Eagles still should be presumptive favorites. The Cowboys, an interesting team, just in the fact that I feel like they're going to put up a lot of points on the scoreboard. Micah Parsons is still there. They got a lot of players that people have heard of, a lot of guys that'll probably make Pro Bowl rosters, but
you got a number two receiver now, which you didn't have the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's it's an intriguing team, but a team that I think you'd be foolish to put them in a bet over the Eagles or even the Commanders at that rate to win the NFC East. And the Giants are the Giants, and like the Cleveland Browns and Raiders, they are a distant fourth and probably not even worth mentioning in this discussion.
No, absolutely not.
So again, for FanDuel, for the Eagles, they are presumptive favorites, minus 135 to win the division. The Commanders in second place at plus 220. The Dallas Cowboys at plus 550. And the Giants at plus 2,400.
2,400. That's almost as good as the Browns odds right there.
Yeah. That'd be something, huh?
If you got $5 in your pocket,
man, go to town.
Yep, absolutely. That defense might, defense wins championships, right? Right. No. All right, never mind. So let's shoot down to the NFC South. So it was the Buccaneers that got the job done in the division a season ago. The Falcons on paper look like they've got all the ingredients to really make a run at it, especially on offense. They just haven't done that. On defense, it looks like they finally started to put a few things together this past offseason to maybe make them look like a more well-rounded team. Yeah. Carolina is in a rebuilding phase, and it looks like things are probably happening more glacial of a pace than light speed. And it sure as heck seems, Phil, like the New Orleans Saints are headed for one of those colossal blow the whole darn thing up and start from the, something less than the studs at this point. So that's kind of what you're looking at for the South.
So, and I think the Buccaneers, I think with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans, I think those two guys, Mike Evans, again, I think he's going to make the Hall of Fame with the way that he's been able to produce in his career playing with Brady and playing with Baker Mayfield. They have some stability going there in Tampa. I think Atlanta is kind of the interesting team where you've started to see a little bit of the pieces that they have with Michael Penix now getting, the full brunt of the offseason training, becoming the full-time starter there. They're kind of an exciting team. We'll have to see if they have the pieces on defense. They did draft a lot of guys on defense in the draft to help kind of get that one going. Bryce Young looked like he was going to be one of these, hate to use the term bust around him, but he kind of turned around mid-season. But it's one of those things that they didn't really have a lot of help around him. So a lot of Bryce Young's development came with their head coach Canales, to kind of get things going. The Saints, I think they're in that Browns and Giants category. I think they're probably especially I just think the three other teams in this division are so much better than them, and they're going to be starting a rookie quarterback by all accounts right now as well. So that is also going to make that pretty tough. The favorites in this division, according to FanDuel, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But this is one of those divisions that there is not a negative or a minus point total to get them there. Tampa Bay Buccaneers plus 100. The Atlanta Falcons second best odds at plus 240. Carolina Panthers at plus 360. New Orleans Saints at plus 1200. So I just said that about the Saints. That really should tell you that it is still a little bit of a wide open race in the NFC South, but plus 1200 kind of tells you all you need to know about the Saints compared to the other three.
Yeah, I'll definitely have my eye on the Falcons because, like I said, on paper, that offense looks pretty formidable. You got a quarterback who's won a lot of football games in his career, not necessarily as a pro quarterback, but he's played a lot of college ball, played a lot of winning football. You got a two-headed monster at running back. You got guys like Drake London and Kyle Pitts that can get involved in the offense. And again, part of what we need to know about Bryce Young is what is he going to be like once you finally get playmakers around him. And that's what I was kind of getting at when I spoke to the glacial pace of the Carolina Panthers rebuild, in that you just don't have enough around him to see what he can do. It's a big ask to have a guy in his relative infancy as an NFL quarterback and say, hey, throw to the dead body of what was that? I can't even think of the guys. Adam Thielen, yeah, the dead body of Adam Thielen, and this rookie receiver and that rookie tight end and all that. Get him some guys that have actually either played winning football or have a heck of a lot of upside to see what you actually have in this guy. And I think, like you point out, Phil, with Canales as your quarterback whisperer as the head coach, I think that is going to go a long way into indicating whether or not this team has any type of real shot or not.
To me, I think the really interesting team in talking about Atlanta, I think it's still going to be the Carolina Panthers. I know we've talked about their growth at kind of a glacial pace and not really moving too fast. I also think of the fact that Bryce Young, I started to see enough to know that he at least can put things together. Maybe not, be the top overall pick in fantasy football or anything like that. Maybe not blow away from a statistical standpoint. But making the right throw, he was starting to do that. Still incredibly undersized, which has its own problems and disadvantages to it. But, the Carolina Panthers are an interesting team just with how hard they played towards the end of the season. So almost kind of getting a little bit of like a semi, very smaller scale of it, like a Lions vibe when Dan Campbell started turning things around here in Detroit.
And of course, we're going to get a lot deeper into this as we get going with the season, but it's also going to be interesting to see how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers handle the loss of yet another solid offensive coordinator. You lost Dave Canales a couple of years ago. We've talked about him in the last few minutes, taken over a few years ago as the Panthers head coach. Now, as we said earlier in the show, you lose Liam Cohen to be the head coach of the Jaguars. Todd Bowles, the head coach of the Buccaneers, the defensive guy, so he's benefited by having a lot of strong offensive minds helping this offense reach the heights that it's gotten to so far. Are they going to continue their string of luck, let's call it, by bringing in another good offensive coordinator this year? And we're just going to have to see how that goes, because you're not going to have the head coach more or less stepping in and really having much of a say-so in the offense, because the defense is his baby. So we'll see. It's an offensive league, and maybe we'll have a changing of the guard at the top of the NFC South this coming season. Time will tell. Last but not least, Phil, we will head to the NFC West. So we had a little bit of change with a little bit of bad luck and some injuries, and it just wasn't the year for the San Francisco 49ers, who had kind of been the aggressors in that division for a handful of years. They were nowhere to be found near the top. It was the LA Rams who were making the most amount of noise in the NFC West a season ago. We started to see some signs of life coming out of the desert with Arizona in year number 2 under Jonathan Gannon, and another year with Kyler Murray at the helm at quarterback. Finally, slowly but surely adding some young pieces down there in Arizona. And Seattle, they are one of those teams where, again, in theory, it seems like they're poised to kind of fade into the background a little bit. But with Sam Darnold moving out to the West Coast, taking over after let's call it what it is, a good season out in Minnesota a season ago. Didn't end the way that he or his team wanted it to go, but a good season. Now he goes out to Seattle. He's the guy under Mike McDonald, the head coach.
Yeah.
What kind of division are we looking at this year out west?
I think this is one of the most intriguing divisions we have. I think this is my number one most intriguing division because I think at the top, the Rams and 49ers, I think that could go either way. And that is a team that, again, when we talk about where the Lions have been and where they want to go to, at one point in time, the 49ers were, the measuring block. Yes, the Eagles did win the Super Bowl this past year, but make no mistake about it, it was the Niners that was able to take them out a couple years back in that, of course, NFC Championship game. The Los Angeles Rams, the ride that they went on towards the end of the season to win that division, do you trust Matthew Stafford one more time to go win that division? So I think those two teams, it is a very much a two-horse race. I think between these two teams, the Cardinals, I still don't really know what to expect from them. And the Seahawks, who knows? I think just as intriguing as 1 and 2, I think 3 and 4 could flip-flop too. You could maybe see the Seahawks maybe taking a couple steps forward with Sam Darnold, perhaps. Of course, they got rid of a lot of the veterans on that team, so who knows where their talent is. But it's really, really intriguing, and I think it comes down to the Rams and 49ers here.
So you don't know, really. I don't know, really. What are the odds makers saying about it?
Yeah. So FanDuel has this one to be as tightly or as close as we kind of been talking about it here. The Los Angeles Rams, the favorite by FanDuel at plus 175. The Niners just behind them at plus 165. The Cardinals at plus 420, and the Seahawks at plus 550. So actually, I read that incorrectly here. That would be the Niners as the favorite, not the Rams. So plus 165 over plus 175.
So they're banking on the fact that you're not going to have a early season drop off with Ayuk being out of the lineup because you're not going to get him back until about Halloween coming off that ACL. You're banking on the fact that the health of Christian McCaffrey is going to be markedly better than it has been. You're banking on the fact that Brock Purdy, now that he's gotten paid, is going to live up to his contract. And you're taking faith in the fact that the defense isn't going to skip a beat with Bob Saleh, I believe, coming back to the 49ers. Is that correct? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think so. I think he is their defensive coordinator once again, yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm thinking, how can you possibly bet against Sean McVay? He's as much of a offensive wizard as there is. Stafford seems like he's got 9 lives. They finally got the running game going. It seems like they're slowly starting to build up that offensive line. I think Puka Nacua is going to continue to be a problem. And the defense is extremely young. And I think they overachieved a season ago, but I think the ingredients are there to at least have a strong chance of being a division-winning defense. So it kind of surprises me that the odds makers are using a little bit more, once again, in the way of blind faith over what's maybe right there in front of you, deciding who's going to win that 2-horse race in the division.
Still very, very close, and it is literally a coin toss, the way that I think FanDuel is putting this one out.
I think that is good enough for now, Phil, and I think you and I are going to tackle the North. That kind of is dedicated to almost like half an episode on its own, and of course, we're going to spend oodles and oodles of time on the Lions, but this was kind of nice to take a broad lens view of what was going on. And it was nice. That kind of gives us something good to talk about again in the end of the dog days of this NFL offseason.
Yeah, 4th of July, kind of that turning point where you're going to start to see, a lot of people, turning up at, the practice facilities just to do voluntary workouts and things like that. And finally, we'll get, training camp going here before too long. Of course, the Lions and the Chargers are going to be the first 2 out of the gate with that Hall of Fame game going. So you can't say football is back yet, but I think never too early to start at least looking maybe outside the North of the Lions to see what else has kind of happened and transpired. And if nothing else, just interesting to see how Vegas is reading, what else happened in the NFL this offseason.
Yeah, and put it this way, if you kind of like to hang out at a random intersection around the Metro Detroit area, let's kind of say, oh, like the Southfield Freeway Service Drive and Rotunda Drive, you're going to start seeing some familiar
Yeah.
automobiles coming and going at predictable hours of the day here very, very soon. Things are going to start to pick up. This was good discussion on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast, and we appreciate you getting back to work from the holiday with us. That's all the time that we have for you. Phil and I are going to be right back here next week with another awesome episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. You're not going to want to miss it. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning. Go Lions. Forward down the field. Over and out.